I'm Dr. Barry, licensed psychologist, and here I share legal and entertainment news from a psychological perspective. This case has a lot of trigger warnings. A lot of people feel very strongly about this case, one way or another. The one thing I want to start with is that the purpose of this trial, the trial that's currently going on for Ashley Benefield, where she is charged with second degree murder for the death of her husband. All of that is because she was denied a stand your ground case. So last year, I think last July, they had a hearing to determine if she could meet criteria for a stand your ground case because the incident occurred in the state of Florida and the prosecution's pretty much saying that her actions were to avoid family court and wanting to eliminate him from being a part of their daughter's life and her life. That's what the prosecution's going to say. And the defense in the stand your ground hearing, which was denied, I think they were trying to say that she was, I don't know, but that she had the right to stand her ground. And that once again was denied. The current trial is, did what she do, does it meet the standard for self-defense? So that's what they're currently saying. This is not stand your ground. This is saying, does it meet criteria for self-defense? We are going to take a look at some of the experts that spoke, including the expert that ended Friday in a Daubert hearing, and the judge has not said whether that expert's testimony is going to come into the case or not. But I do just want to take a look at some of the things that he said, and that's going to be the goal for today. I do have all of the full links. If you would like to see this case without without my commentary, without the interruptions, please see the full links down in the description. Grizzly True Crime has also done a phenomenal job covering this case. I have watched right along with Grizzly True Crime, and just this morning, the lawyer went over Ashley Benefield's testimony from a lawyer's perspective. So that's available on his channel. Okay. So let's hop right into this case. I'm going to start with just a brief clip from Court TV that talks about the stand your ground hearing being denied. All right. And the sound might come in a little high, so let's prepare our ears. I'm going to try to bring it down a little bit, but like the sound, it might be kind of higher.
I met Ashley 9 months after my mom passed.
So the person speaking is Eva, the victim in this case, his daughter. And so
He told me that they were actually married, not just dating.
So her claim was that while she was pregnant with their daughter, he poisoned her through heavy metals.
They disproved all of the allegations like every other time, but that started the real problems between Ashley and Doug.
He's saying the neighbor came over, female neighbor. It was a domestic. She shot her husband.
In Florida, the judge has denied defendant Ashley Benefield's stand your ground defense. And we brought you the 2-day hearing back in July. Ashley Benefield is accused of murdering her husband, Doug, in 2020. Now, they had separated and were embroiled in a bitter child custody battle. In his ruling, Judge Stephen White says the state has proven by clear and convincing evidence that the victim's homicide was not a singular act of necessary self-defense, but was instead the culmination of a lengthy, concerted effort by the defendant to eliminate the victim from her life and the life of their child. When the defendant's efforts to enlist the assistance of law enforcement, child protective services, and the judicial system failed, she took matters into her own hands. That's
all right. And so that is what is being claimed by the state. And it does sound like there were definitely issues within the marriage. And there are going to be some experts that are going to talk about some of their observations. So I'm going to jump to day 2 of the trial because there was a Dr. Barbara Russell, who's a licensed clinical social worker. She spoke, she testified. She was called by the prosecution, and it comes up that Ashley was actually living with her and she was her former therapist. And lots of people had thoughts about that. And so let's listen to her testimony and then we will talk about it. I'm going to see how it goes with it being on like 1.25 speed. If I need to slow it down, I will.
Thank you so much.
Good morning.
Good morning.
My name is Judge White. I'm going to be presiding over this case. As the deputy said, just make yourself comfortable in that chair. Get about to 12 to 15 inches away from the microphone. It does adjust up, down, left, right, however you need it. But if you just speak directly and allow your voice into the microphone, it'll pick up everything.
Thank you, sir.
And please state your name.
Barbara J. Russell.
Can you spell Barbara Ann Russell?
BarbaraRussell.
And what is your profession?
I'm a licensed clinical social worker. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology, and I work as a clinical and forensic mental health professional.
Okay. And how long have you known Ashley Benefield?
I've known her since April of 2020.
Okay. And when you first became involved with Ashley, it was on a professional level, correct?
Correct.
All right. And then since the time that you had that interaction, you have stayed in touch with Ashley.
Correct.
And subsequent to the shooting that happened, she actually moved into your house, correct?
Correct.
Okay. And who all lived at the house?
Myself, my husband, and my 19-year-old daughter.
All right. And approximately how long did she live at your house?
Approximately 8 months.
And you would see her on a daily basis?
Pretty much, yes.
Okay.
Okay. And so the thing that I will say, and I don't know exactly what state this individual is licensed in. The one thing that I will say is that I personally would not allow a current or former client to live with me. And if I just that's my own personal boundary. I would not rent to a client. I would not go into business with a former client. There are certain boundaries that I keep, and it's not only for my protection, it's also for the client's protection as well, to make sure that their clinical rights aren't violated in any way. And then also, because once a client comes to live with you, they can never be your client again, I would think that you could never work with them on a professional level. So there are clients that I connect with. I would love to go get coffee with them. I would love to be friends with them, but that goes outside of our professional relationship. And I think it would be up to the state board to determine that. If the professional relationship had ended, I don't know that there's a law that says a client can't move in with you and there's no sexual relationship, because most of our regulations are around intimacy with a client. I think most standards or like if you were to call your professional liability insurance. So I just recently I had a situation come up where I had to consult my liability insurance just to see if I handled a situation appropriately or not. And they gave me the thumbs up. I handled it correctly. Great. But if I reached out to my liability insurance and said, "Hey, I have a former client. We've been discharged for 2 years and I'd like to help them out and let them move in with me." My liability insurance is probably going to say, don't do that." Like, nope. Like that's not a good idea. Uh Boundaries and ethics can be, mm, for me personally, I have very clear ones. Not everyone has very clear boundaries. So I personally would say I wouldn't do that. I don't know if it technically violated a stated because they had discharged. If it was an active client, I do think that that could violate because that creates a dual relationship. Because it was discharged, it's I wouldn't do it, and I don't think anybody's liability insurance or profession, especially after a client committed a crime, because I think she moved in after the the incident. I think that's what happened, and so that's why I wouldn't do it, because this person and then I can get dragged in to their criminal proceedings, and no. So it's a big no for me, but okay. And so she's going to go on to just say that Ashley never talked about the incident. She never asked her about the incident. And a lot of that is probably because of her lawyer likely recommending that she not talk with anyone about it. But that is what happened. I just want to see if there is another doctor. That's the detective, and then, okay, Dr. Brad Broder. Okay, so I'm gonna get to Dr. Broder's testimony because he evaluated both Ashley and the victim in this case to assess their parenting. And he likely came to some diagnosis. And I think there have been pre-trial things that have kept both of their diagnoses out. He's a fact witness. He is not giving an opinion. And so he is strictly going to talk about what he saw, what he observed, what happened. He is there as a fact witness. He is not giving a clinical opinion because there's going to be an objection during part of his testimony where they're going to make sure that he's testifying based on the facts of the case and not rendering an opinion. And their diagnoses are not going to come up at all. And I really wish that their my brain that their diagnoses had come in just for my own personal, like, not for the court, just like I just would have loved to have known what their diagnoses were.
Yes, sir.
Please state your name.
Brad Stephen Broder,
How do you spell your last name?
Broeder.
What is your profession?
I'm a psychologist, clinical psychologist licensed here in the state of Florida and in New York State.
And how long have you been a clinical psychologist?
I got my PhD in clinical psychology back in December of 1986.
And when did you move to Florida? I think you said New York. You were in
Correct.
New York
Correct.
before.
I first practiced in New York and relocated here in the summer of 96. I was licensed here by February.
Something happened in the chat that is like one of my big pet peeves. So I hate when the portrayal of therapists in media when it's unethical. So it would be unethical for a marriage therapist to recommend separation and then start a relationship with the spouse. So that is unethical. And the because often the spouse, the other spouse in that case normally files an ethics complaint, and that's a valid ethics complaint. So people lose their license over stuff like this comment from Ace Moonshot, where Tad Lasso totally ruined for me because they had the former marriage counselor who recommended trial separation hooking up with the wife while Ted was away, and so that is completely unethical. I also saw there's been multiple just therapists in media that end up in relationships, and that is unethical. They can lose their license. One of the biggest reasons why therapists lose their license is for having inappropriate relationships with clients. Some boards will allow for like 7 years after the relationship has ended. I have told y'all, I'll say it now, I'll say it forever. My thing is never. I would never ever have a relationship with a client. Recently, I was meeting with somebody and I let the client know, I let the parent know. I don't do touch in sessions where if a client needs physical comfort, I have a weighted blanket. I bring a parent or they can bring a trusted person into session. I don't personally offer touch in session because that can get murky and it can, like, I want to be able to say I never touch them. Like I want to be able to say nope, I never ever That's just what I want to be able to say. Clients can ask me for a hug and I give side hugs, but like that's my whole pet peeve. I work with people that have histories of being taken advantage of, histories of people crossing ethical and boundaries with them. And so that's why my boundaries are so very clear. And the weighted blanket, what it does is it gives the feel of a hug without me having. So I will ask them, I have a weighted blanket. Would you like it? And if they say yes, I go and get it and I will place it on them, but that's it. Like, sure, like, and it's really a church side hug, Sarah. You said psych hospital side hug. Like, I learned the side hug in the evangelical church. It's like all my parts, all your parts away, and it's just like a little side hug. And if I meet a child, so sometimes I will meet with children where as soon as they see me, they want to like run up to me and hug me, and I stop them, and right in front of the parents, I say, "You just met me, you don't really know me. Like let's talk and have a session, and then after the session, you can ask me if you would like a hug." But I'm very particular about that stuff. I can also be overwhelmed by touch easily, and so, it can be a sensory overload for me, and so, like, that's another reason why I just don't do it, but, um, uh, yeah, it's a whole thing. So, let's get back to Dr. Broder's testimony.
Of 1997 and have been practicing here ever since.
Okay. And do you have your own private practice?
Exactly. I'm a solo practitioner.
Okay. Do you also do some what I would
Okay, so they're gonna go back and forth to talk about his experience. He does a bunch of mandated reporter evaluations and stuff. So I'm gonna skip through that a little bit.
Services that I was going to be speaking to, for example, Kimberly Griffin, who is the case coordinator. But in addition to that, I asked both Ashley and Doug for their own people that they'd want me to speak to. But then, of course, doing the evaluation, I have the kind of wherewithal based upon what I learned from them if there are other people I need to speak to or that I believe I should speak to in order to get a more complete picture of the individual.
Okay. And did you, in fact, do that with reference to both of them? Speak
Yes,
to collateral contact?
Yes, I did. Yes.
Okay. Did you meet with Doug and Ashley and Emerson together or separate?
Given the structure of their family unit, I had multiple interviews with each of them individually. I had several interviews with them together, a couple of interviews with them together as the couple, but several additional interviews with them when they would exchange Emerson at my office and when we would, kind of see how that the drop off or the exchange goes. But I had also seen each parent with the child both in their residence as well as in my office. So there were multiple interviews.
Okay. So this sounds pretty extensive. So how much time did it go on over?
It's throughout the summer of 2020. I think the report was actually completed and submitted on September 14th of 2020.
So I want to speak with you about Ashley specifically. Did she ever show any hesitation about meeting you with Doug present?
No.
Okay. Did she act differently when she was with Doug meeting you as opposed to when she was not with Doug meeting with you?
As I had indicated or described in my report, she did demonstrate or present with a different demeanor when seen together versus when I would just see her individually.
Okay. And when you saw the two of them together, did they discuss the plans for going forward? And I'm talking about moving. So did they discuss that with you?
Ashley had made it very clear that she had every intention and desire to relocate back to her home state of Maryland. Doug had the impression that this was something that he too could do because he had some connections to the Defense Department and some of the work that he did. He felt he'd have more clients up there, so he was perceiving that as he shared with me, a fresh start that they could reconcile and be together in Maryland.
And when Ashley and Doug met with you together, did Ashley indicate that this was the plan, that they were moving all together as a group?
Ashley had no intention of moving together as a group. She had every intention of moving with her mother and Emerson and becoming situated in her grandmother had passed away and the mother had inherited the house. So they had their residence established. So she had that plan.
Okay. And so I guess I wasn't being very clear. Were they moving their items together, like same U-Haul truck?
No, absolutely not.
Okay.
I just want to clarify something for the chat. So, witness, the day the incident happened, uh, Ashley asked him to come over and help load things into the truck. And she specifically asked him to load her items last so that she could get her things out first and then he could move his things. Well, she got on the truck and realized that things were all kind of mixed up and everything was all together and they had a bit of an argument about it and things escalated from there. It does sound like Doug wanted to be with her. He also wanted to be with his daughter. Witness, I will also just add that when Ashley is, I think, about 30 years younger than Doug and about 10 years older than his daughter. And it's going to come up during her cross examination that there might have been some jealousy of his ex and some conflict with his daughter. She's going to get upset about a gift that she gave to his 15-year-old daughter who had lost her mom and dad. So Ashley and Doug married after knowing each other for 13 days. And this is sometimes referred to as the Black Swan trial because she was a ballerina. He put a whole bunch of money, and her mom invested into opening a dance studio. And from there, once he reversed his vasectomy at her request, and I think she paid for it with her debit card, and she got pregnant about maybe like 3 months after that. So she ends up with bad morning sickness, moves in with her mother, and then starts a lot of these protective order processes and all of that. And so he files an order to be able to be at the birth. And before anything can happen with that order, she has an induced, like, she has her doctor induce her to have the baby as soon as possible. She gives the baby her, like, I don't know, like, she gives the baby someone in her family's last name and not his last name. He is upset by this, and he wants the name changed to his last name. There are allegations that she showed up one day with an engagement ring on, and that upset him, and he was upset by that. Some text messages are gonna come in, and the prosecution gives both sides of the text messages, and it looks, if you only hear her side and what she presented with the text messages, you're like, "Oh my gosh, he's such a jerk." But then you hear the whole story, and there's more to it, and this just sounds like a lot of back and forth. For me personally, I'm not sure if lethal force was necessary. It does sound like he could be controlling. It sounds like he was upset. It sounded like he wanted to be with her. He was probably confused because, from his perspective, there might have been mixed messages. But from her perspective, she might have thought if she didn't say what he wanted her to say, that he would get upset. And so, like, this whole thing is very, very, very complicated. And Sarah, I saw you say, did she just want a baby? And we'll never know. We will never ever know. It definitely sounds like she didn't want to be a family with him. And as soon as she was, like, pregnant and moved out to live with her mom, because she said she got morning sick and she needed to stay with her mom, it sounds like after that point, things just kept escalating and escalating and escalating until we got to this part. And so it all just sounds very, very just ugh. So on the day of the incident, witness, her mom was at the house, and before he gets home, or around the time he's getting to the house to help her load up the truck, her mom takes Emerson, the baby, the 2.5-year-old at the time, I think. She takes the baby to the park, and everything happens while mom and Emerson are at the park. So the prosecution is going to say things. Now, I've worked with victims of DV before, and a lot of the things that you think, like, oh, like, why didn't you do this or why didn't you do that? It's going to sound like the prosecution is badgering her a little bit, and we will definitely get to that part. It's my understanding he didn't meet his daughter until she was 6 months old. So it's my understanding that Ashley kept the daughter from him until she was 6 months old. And then there were allegations of physical abuse, there were allegations of SA, there were allegations of all of these things, and CPS was involved. And that's why this investigator came in, and all of the reports were unfounded. There was no evidence of any of this. And so it's a very, very sad case. um, I'm not sure what the jury's gonna do. I'm not sure if the jury is gonna think the prosecution has proved the case enough. I'm not sure. All right, let's keep
Or
going.
Ashley never told you about that.
Quite to the contrary, she made it clear that she did not want him to move in, regardless of what he thought or whatever he was planning. That was not part of the plan.
Okay. And when she was alone, she would indicate to you those things that you just described? Or
Yes,
did she indicate that when she was with Doug?
When she was with me during our individual meetings.
Okay. When she was with Doug, how was her demeanor? How was her attitude about those issues?
She would basically respond in a very deferential way. She would let him say what he wanted to say, but my focus was not so much on what their future plans were. It was, they weren't even officially divorced. My focus was, again, getting back to the point about best interest of the child. Child protection team is, how do we get this family out of this stressful situation and then create something that's going to be better for Emerson?
Okay. Did Doug, during your joint sessions, did Doug express in front of Ashley that his hopes that moving forward, this was going to be an attempt at reconciliation? Did he express that in front of Ashley?
Yes, he did.
Okay. Did Ashley ever correct him and say, whoa, wait a minute. No, we're not doing that.
Not really. I think the closest she ever got to that was to kind of say, just kind of slow it down and, we'll talk about that later. And that's, that kind of thing. She would kind of deflect attention away from that.
And she's gonna have a very good answer to why she did that later. And I truly can see both sides of things. Um, I wish a different safety plan had been used, and that's what the expert from yesterday evening, he's gonna talk about his advice. If somebody is gonna leave, there is a way to do it, and you don't get into an argument in the house and do like this just isn't the if you're gonna safely leave, this is not the way.
And did she ever say in one of her individual sessions with you, did she ever say anything to you about she was running out of time and needed to move to Maryland or something like that? Do you recall?
Yes, we had that discussion in one of the sessions.
And can you just explain what she said about that?
In essence, she was very frustrated and concerned that
Okay, so he's objecting to what he's about to say. The void between, thank you for clarifying your question. Why didn't she want him to move in while they were alone? Was just curious. So everybody's gonna think that Ashley was trying to move to Maryland because her attempts to block family court in Florida, it was not working. And that she was gonna try to move to Maryland and then start this process all over and then try to get sole custody of Emerson in Maryland. That's kind of what everybody was thinking, that she was gonna try because uh it's my understanding there was a court date coming up. They're gonna go back and forth. Was there really a court date coming up? Um, Dr. I'm bad with names. The doctor that's testifying now, he was going to release a report on both of them, and he would not let them know what his recommendations were or what was going to be included in his report. If they wanted a copy of the report, they were going to have to get it from their attorney, who was going to have to subpoena it. And so there was a lot of things that were going to be out of her control. She might have felt that she was losing control of the situation. That's how the prosecution sees this. And she's charged with second-degree murder and not first degree. Doug's family feels that this was planned. The evidence isn't clear enough for the state to prove that, I don't think. And so the state has charged her with second degree. All right.
As I understand it, he's called as a fact witness, and he's giving opinions.
So this is where that fact witness versus opinion witness comes up. So I have been a fact witness where I'm just saying this is what happened. An opinion is saying I believe she has this diagnosis. I think this person is fit or this person isn't fit. You're giving your opinion that's beyond what's been said. So he's just here as a fact witness. They're going to go back and forth. I'm going to fast forward.
Out of time and wanting to move to Maryland.
She was openly sharing with me her utter frustration with the sheriff's office, with CPT, with the court system, indirectly with myself, although she had also complimented me by thanking me for doing a quote unquote thorough job. But who was going to look out for Emerson? Who was going to help Emerson? And she needed to do something. She needed this to be over with so she could get on with her life. She used the phrase, "My life is in a shambles."
Okay. And did she make any statements to you about why she needed this to be over so quickly? Or why was it, did she feel it was taking too long? I guess it should be my question.
But she certainly felt it took too long and she just wanted to get on with her life.
Okay. Did she admit to you that she was in fact going to marriage counseling with Doug?
She had been in agreement with them starting with a second marriage counselor, Dr. Quintel, after their attempts at marriage counseling with Sharon Foster had not worked out.
Okay. So she indicated that their intent to go to Dr. Quintel. But during the same time, was she still saying they would not reconcile, or she was saying they did want to reconcile?
I don't think she ever used the word reconcile when with Doug. She clearly made it very clear to me that she had no intention of reconciling.
Okay. And during this time, I would say the year at least before your meeting, did Ashley talk to you about doing things with Doug? And for instance, I'm talking about lunch and activities. Did she talk to you about that?
Throughout the time that I worked with them, it was very clear they were very open, sharing with me the things that they would do together, such as, for example, the hit movie that particular summer was the sci-fi thriller Tenet, T-E-N-E-T, and they had agreed to go see that so the grandma could watch Emerson. They have a quote-unquote date. They enjoyed the movie so much, but also found it kind of confusing, hard to follow, that they agreed to see it a second time together and had a follow-up date for that movie. But in addition to that, they had done other things. She would go to Doug's apartment complex where they could use the community pool and take Emerson into the pool. They shared with me that they had gone to the beach. She described in detail watching Doug. I think it was Father's Day specifically in my notes there, where she described how nice it was to see Doug playing with Emerson, playing in the sand with Emerson. And so then from there, they would go out to lunch or go out to dinner, sometimes with Emerson and the grandmother, sometimes without. So they were, throughout the time I was working with them, they were seeing each other.
Okay.
Okay, so that's kind of the main part of his testimony. I want to get to a little bit of the cross-examination because he's basically going to feel that and so the other side is just going to say like could things have been happening that you weren't aware of. I want to see because this was short. I don't think he said that much. Dr. Quintel, I don't think his testimony was very long.
2008 on, and then prior to that, 2006.
And at some point, did you become familiar with Doug and Ashley Benefield?
Yes,
Okay. And when was this?
that would have been in 2020.
And do you recall about when in 2020 that was?
They came in for their first visit as a couple's visit on 7/15/2020.
Okay. So we heard from Dr. Broder, he was talking about his goal was to do an evaluation. What was your goal with meeting with them? Was it an evaluation or something else?
No, I was referred by another therapist to do trauma resolution treatment for both Doug and Ashley.
And trauma resolution treatment means that there was something going on. And it does sound like Doug would like punch walls when he got mad. It does sound like there was some control. It does sound like things were happening.
And as part of that, did you meet with them together as well as separate, or how did that work?
I did. I met with them originally as a couple. We ended the treatment as a couple, and then there were individual sessions in between.
Okay. I won't hold you to this, but about how many times did you see them?
So I met with Doug twice individually, Ashley 5 times individually, both of them as a couple twice. There was a total of 4 hours for couples, 10.5 hours for Ashley, and 4.5 hours for Doug.
Okay. And at the first session, did it seem to you as though, let me back up. The first session, was it together?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And during that first session, did it seem as though they wanted to work things out?
During the first session, they talked about, yes, they wanted to work things out.
Okay. When they were together, did they indicate they wanted to get back together, like reunify?
The goal was for them to reunify and moving to Maryland.
Okay. When Ashley met with you by herself, did she still make that representation?
That they were moving to Maryland, yes.
Okay. And was there anything different about her representation?
Ashley was different when she was separate from Doug in terms of more descriptive of things that had happened between the two of them that troubled her. So some stuff that was scary.
And we won't get into specifics, but
Ask the question. I don't think it is answered.
They want that answer in.
so did she indicate she still wanted to reconcile with him when she was with you alone?
So there was a great question that came in about the number of trauma survivors that don't believe Ashley. And I don't know if it's because the question specifically says, is it a case of I survived worse? And the way that I see it is more than one thing can be true at the same time. And I think what the jury is going to have to say is, was this all Doug and she's the innocent victim? Was this a little bit of both? Was this, like the jury's going to have to unravel what, because really it only comes down to that day, to that incident. Was lethal force necessary when, because she's going to say that he wouldn't let her leave the room, and I think she's going to say that he hit her for the first time. Was lethal force required? Is there something else that could have resolved this? um and I don't know. So, she does show a lot of emotion on the stand, and, that can be for a lot of different reasons. Um, Grizzly True Crime, I think, saw an interview with Ashley where she talked about being a ballerina and knowing how to put on a show. And so I know Grizzly True Crime kind of had some thoughts about that she's made public on her case. And so sometimes there can be this cycle of violence that goes back and forth. And I've worked with individuals that have borderline personality disorder, that are in a relationship with a narcissist, and the malignant narcissist, they're the ones that are aggressive. But my client that has borderline traits or borderline personality disorder, there are times when things escalate for everybody, and there's this huge, and not it's just a dynamic within their relationship that's extremely toxic. They both trigger each other, and one of these people, like, they are not safe. And I often talk with those clients about ways to get safe. I give them resources. I always make it up to my client about whether they leave or not, if there are no children involved. Children can't be exposed to DV. Children exposure to extreme yelling and extreme conflict and screaming and children being exposed to those kinds of things, to emotional harm, to all of that, that causes harm to the child. And so I have to make sure that children are safe if there are situations like that. And but this case is just very, very difficult. And I wanted to hear from the experts first, just just so we could get a better understanding of how things were presenting. I think Doug was under the impression that they were going to have this happy life in Maryland, and that wasn't her plan. And I don't know that she felt safe enough, or because he wouldn't have agreed for her to move to Maryland if he knew that she wasn't going to be with him. I don't think he would have agreed to that. And so I love all the words. I can be verbose at times. And so I really try. Like, I'm trying to make sense of this. And of course, this is not a psychological evaluation. I don't know her. I don't know what she's gone through. This is just my general thoughts based on what I've seen. Um And I feel like the defense is trying to present one thing and the prosecution is trying to present something else. The truth might be somewhere in the middle, or like, I don't know. I don't know. And I wish we knew what both of their diagnoses were, but they fought to keep that out. And I don't know who fought for what, but Doug's diagnosis isn't coming in and her diagnosis isn't coming in. And would that change things if we knew their diagnoses? I don't know. And a lot of people are saying, like, should there be a DNA test? Because I think like that I think her ex-husband, so this Doug was her second marriage, I think at 24 years old. Doug was her second marriage, and there were allegations of infidelity from her first marriage. And so we don't know. Um uh, all right. Her testimony is very triggering. So if you have to step out for her part of the testimony, please do. Please take care of yourself. I will pause it at times. We will breathe together, all that.
Did she say she wanted to reconcile with him when she was alone with you?
So I don't recall whether she said she wanted to reconcile with him or not. I think that there were challenges in their marriage and she was questioning whether she wanted to be with him or not.
Okay. Did Ashley tell you that she and Doug were also seeing Dr. Broder?
They both mentioned that Dr. Broder was doing an evaluation, and I didn't know what it was regarding.
Okay. And did Ashley say to you at any time that she was frustrated with the system?
I think Ashley was discouraged. There had been many things brought up, accusations, CPS, judge, that didn't go her way. So I think there was definitely some discouragement with that.
Okay. I'm sorry to cut you off.
No, you're fine.
Did she express any frustration at the time it was taking for Dr. Broder's report?
Yeah, she thought that that was taking a very long time.
Okay. And did she express to you that she was worried about what his report would say, or worried about when the report was released?
She was worried about what it would say. She said if it were to be disparaging of Doug, she was concerned that he would be upset and take some form of retribution with that.
Okay. The last time that you saw them was when?
The last visit was on 9/25/20.
Do you remember what day of the week that was? You might not, but.
Maybe Thursday, Friday.
Okay.
I can look if you need that.
No, that's okay.
Okay.
And about what time of day was it?
I believe that was a morning session, 10:30-ish.
Okay. Did they say Dr. Broder's report was done?
I don't recall them saying that the report was done. I know that they had been waiting on it and it was supposed to determine specific things for how they move forward.
Okay. And did they indicate when they were going to court next?
I do not know that. I don't recall anything mentioned
Okay.
about when court was.
Did they indicate to you when they expected they were going to have access to that report? Excuse me.
No, I don't. There was not.
All right. And so that's basically that part of his testimony. I will play a little bit of his cross.
Why Doug Benefield would want to remain in this relationship with Ashley Benefield.
I questioned why both would want to stay in the relationship, but specifically to answer the question with Doug, I did bring that up in a session, that it seems like Ashley is saying very disparaging comments, and I'm not sure why and what you see in that ongoingly moving forward. I did bring that up to him.
In fact, you were perplexed by it, were you not?
I was confused. Sure, it did. Yeah.
Would it be a fair conclusion to say that he was hell-bent on staying with her?
I would say that he really wanted the relationship to work from everything that he told me.
Okay. We're going to have to recall you, so.
And I'm not sure if a part of this was cultural as well. And what I mean by cultural is, and I think there were some statements about Doug saying something to the effect of like that they were destined to be together, or God put us together, or something like that. And sometimes within certain religious groups, divorce can be looked down on, or it can some people can feel like a divorce is a failure, like I didn't do everything I could do, and they have this desire to be a family. But it sounds like Doug wasn't getting that she wanted nothing to do with him, and that wasn't uh, it sounds like that wasn't it sounds like that w but then, because I think there was one message where he like, when she had the engagement ring on, it sounded like he got upset and he was like, "Fine, we're done," but I don't know. Their whole back and forth was very confusing to me, but when you look at the cycle of violence, let me go on ahead and pull that up. Cycle of coercive control, um, because there is this cycle where, um let me make this bigger. All right. And I have shared this resource before. Let me see. All right. And I will put this link in the chat, and I'll also make sure to put it down in the I'll put it down in the description as well. But with power and control, there can be this use of coercion, intimidation, emotional harm, isolation, using children, because she kind of felt like he was trying to use his relationship with his daughter to be with her. But then, if he wanted to see his daughter, she wanted to be there because she thought he might have been harming the child. Like the whole thing just ugh, it sounds like it was a very, very toxic situation for everyone involved. Using economic power, and I want my relationship to be equal. I want there to be negotiation and fairness, non-threatening behavior, respect, trust and support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, and economic partnership. That is what I would want in a safe and healthy relationship. All right. And so let's put that in the chat. Um, let me just make sure if that is the Duluth wheel. I believe that is the Duluth wheel of power and control. Yes. Yes. That is the Duluth wheel of power and control. I didn't know it by its actual name. But yes, that is what the expert at the end of Friday talked about. And we are going to play that towards the end. I'm not going to play all of her testimony. I'm going to play a little bit of her direct examination, a little bit of the cross examination, and then I'm going to play the expert from yesterday and answer any questions that you all have. All right. And so this is her starting off with her attorney. They're going to start off with just kind of like, where were you born? Like, h- her, love of ballet. And then they're getting into this other part.
Ashley.
Um, he was funny, very smart, charming. We just instantly clicked.
Was Doug in the military?
Yes, just like my dad, he was in naval aviation.
Did he turn out to be who you thought he was?
No, not at all.
I want to direct your attention, Ashley, now, if I can, to the day of the homicide, September 27th, 2020.
Okay.
Specifically late in the afternoon. Would you tell us why Doug was at your home?
He came over to help load some of the larger items that my mom and I had kind of pre-staged in the garage into the U-Haul truck.
And were there any discussions between the two of you about the order that these things should be placed in the back of the truck?
Yes, we had discussed that my things would be going in last, right at the front, so they would be easy to get out first. At one point, he had me help him load one of the larger pieces into the back of the U-Haul truck. And when I was up in the truck with him, I realized that everything had been all like mixed together and it was no longer separated. And I pointed that out to him, and he got really offended and upset. He said, "It shouldn't be your stuff, your house, my house."
Was there a particular demand he made at that time?
He said I needed to start acting like a wife.
Tell us at that point how you chose to deal with him.
I tried to change the subject. I could see how upset he was getting. So I wanted to kind of alleviate that.
And how was Doug reacting to your efforts to do that?
He was getting more upset and aggressive and threatening.
I wish they'd asked for specifics with what the aggressive and threatening was. They aren't going to go into that, and I don't think the prosecution is going to ask either. The prosecution is going to let some stuff in where you might think they might object because they want to dive deeper into it, because some things are being brought up that I think they've previously said weren't going to come up. And the prosecution does say if they were going for battered woman syndrome, that they would need to have their own mental health expert evaluate her. And that's because she was never evaluated by their mental health expert. The guy that testified at the end of yesterday, he met with her for like 15 to 20 hours over I don't know, like he did a lot of talk with her, and he's saying it wasn't an evaluation. Um but it wasn't there. It was that part was a little strange for me personally, because it seemed like he was coming in with more knowledge of the case than just a general DV expert might have, because he specifically met with her for a long period of time, and it sounded like he was on her side, in my opinion. And so, all right.
Do you attempt to avoid confrontation with him?
Yes.
What do you do?
I was trying to get him to leave. I kept
So I am going to speed it up just a little bit, just 1.25, just a little bit. All right.
suggesting that maybe we should be done.
Okay. So remember that this is sped up just a little bit. Okay.
Saying I was tired. We should just wrap it up for the day.
And what was Doug's reaction to that effort?
He heard me, but he completely disregarded what I was saying.
Ashley, would you tell us if there came a time shortly thereafter where there was physical contact between the two of you?
Yes.
Tell us about it.
We were in the living room, and as he came up to me, instead of walking past me, he walked like right into me, like a body check. He like thumped me.
His shoulder to your shoulder?
Yes.
And describe for us, if you can, the force of the bump.
It caught me off guard. I almost fell. I like stumbled.
How was he acting at that point?
He was clearly hostile. He was mumbling under his breath and was glaring at me.
What was your concern?
I could see that it was escalating, and I didn't want him to blow up at me.
Was there a second instance of physical contact?
Yes.
Tell us about that, please.
We were in the garage, and it was very much like the living room. I had just suggested strongly that I wanted to be done for the day. And he, as he came up to me, he walked right into me. Again, body checked me.
Finally, was there a third instance of contact?
Yes.
What happened?
We were in the hallway, and we were coming opposite directions towards each other, and he had a box. And as he walked up to me, he looked me in the eye, and he drove the corner of the box up into me.
Where?
My side.
Indicating on your right side.
Yes, sir.
In the hip area?
Yes, sir.
What was the result of that?
Scratching. It burned.
Yes, sir.
I'm going to fast forward a little bit.
Numbers 8, 9, and 10.
We're going to show pictures of her face or something.
What Exhibit 8 represents, Ashley?
It's a scratch right here.
And was that scratch caused by the cardboard box that you just related?
Yes, sir.
When was that photograph taken?
The night of September 27th, 2020 at the sheriff's office.
Okay, and how about exhibit number 9?
Also scratches on my side.
From the same incident?
Yes, sir.
Also taken that evening at the sheriff's office?
Yes, sir.
Okay, and exhibit 10?
The same scratches as in 9. They're just, it's a close-up.
Do these photographs actually truly inaccurate?
So I'm just going to fast forward a little bit because those are the scratches on her side. So I'm just going to fast forward. And then they're going to admit those into evidence.
What was your response, Ashley, after being struck by the cardboard box?
I apologized.
Why would you have apologized?
Because I could see how upset he was, and I didn't want him to get more mad at me.
Doug go after that incident?
He continued to the garage with the box.
And what happens at that point?
We started getting into a back and forth about being done for the day and what still needed to be packed and that I wanted to be done. And we ended up in our daughter's bedroom, and he started screaming at me. He said, "Shut the fuck up." He started calling me names. And he said, "I can see what you're doing. You're trying to get me to leave." He said, "I don't have to leave. I can stay and spend the night if I want to because I'm your husband."
At that point, Ashley, how did you feel with respect to your own personal safety?
I was scared.
Did you take any steps to try to avoid anything further?
Yes, I ran to try to leave the house.
And where did you run to?
To the front door.
Did you make it?
No.
Tell us what happened.
He stopped me. He grabbed me by the hand and he yanked me back. I'm not really sure how he did it, but he spun around so he was in front of me, between me and the door.
So
He said,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
he said, "Where the fuck do you think you're going?"
What was your response? Do you specifically recall? Tell us.
I just blurted it out. I said, "I'm done and you need to leave now."
What was Doug's reaction to that command to leave now?
He said, "You can't fucking leave me."
Then what happens?
He hit me on the side of the head.
Actually, I'm going to.
So they're showing Doug's family. So this is when and I hate it when the camera does this, but that's what the camera's cutting away to Doug's family.
It's been marked as defendant's exhibit number 7.
Gonna fast forward.
Accurate picture of what your face looked like on that night.
Yes, sir.
Who took that photograph?
I don't remember her name. She was at the sheriff's office.
At the sheriff's office? Okay. Now, what is it about that photograph that shows or reflects the slight?
And so she's going to talk about there being some a little bit of something. I think it was the left side. There was something swollen or something like that. Discoloration. Okay. She's going to say that Doug had never hit her before.
What did you do?
I ran
Where?
to my room
Why?
because I was scared.
But did she run to get the gun though? Is that because there was a weapon in her room. And so
Ashley, did you have anything in your room that could protect you?
I had my gun.
Did you grab the gun?
Yes.
As you're grabbing the gun, what, if anything, did you hear?
I heard the door hitting a doorstop.
As if it was open?
Yes.
And what do you see, Ashley, when you look up?
Doug was standing in the doorway. His face was red. The veins were bulging in his neck. The way he was looking at me, it didn't even look like Doug. His eyes were...
she said his eyes were black. It cut out on my end. I don't know if it cut out on
Did he
anybody.
yell anything at you?
He said, "You're fucking done."
And what does he do at that point?
I just held the gun like in front of me and I said, stop. And he like turned and he got into this like a fighting stance. I got low and he started like moving his arms and his hands around. And he was making these like jerking motions.
What were you expecting when you were holding the gun out in front of you and you told him to stop?
I thought when he saw it, he would leave.
Did he?
No.
At that point, Ashley, what are you thinking?
I thought he was going to kill me.
She's the one holding the gun, and I get it. And somebody asked if I feel that she's credible, and honestly, I think that's going to be up to the jury. I think it might have been I'm not going to play it. So the prosecution is going to ask her to reenact this, and she's going to get very, very. I don't know that that was a good look because the prosecution they were appropriately asking her questions, but it could have looked like they were being too hard on her because if the jury is seeing her as a victim, the prosecution doing that could be a bad look for the jury. I don't know. I don't know how the jury's going to see it. The lawyer covered it earlier and that he kind of mentioned that. Sometimes when a defendant testifies, sometimes that lets the prosecution open certain doors and go into to certain things. And I think the chat was a little half and half on was it helpful or was it not really helpful to the court. Sarah, you asked a great question. Did she lure him there? And that's where some of the question marks of the mother taking Emerson to the park, that's where everything seemed to fall into place perfectly. And she has never talked to anyone. She went to the neighbor and I think said that her husband was hurt I don't know, she went to the neighbor and the neighbor was the one I think that called the police. But um she didn't call from her house. She ran next door to the neighbor and he's the one that or somebody at the neighbor called and the prosecution pretty much feels like maybe she did lure him there. I don't know what the jury is going to think. I don't know. Um, the courtroom didn't seem and I don't know who's there supporting her in the courtroom and I don't know if they only showed Doug's side. The Doug side did not seem to be moved by any of this. And um uh and she has two pew pews. She has two and she was a concealed carry holder. And he, I think, normally carried a weapon on him. He did not have one this day, and I don't know. I don't know what the jury. So Amy, I'm with you. If we are torn legally, she gets the benefit of the unknowns. Those are reasonable doubts. But so Amy, also, I didn't watch every second of the trial. So I haven't been exposed to what the jury is exposed to. And the jury is going to try to see if they can work out any questions together within their group. So can they answer any questions they have? The defense hasn't rested yet. There's still more testimony that's going to come possibly from the defense's side. And so I don't know what's going to happen with that. Um uh I might not have been a good person to have on the jury because um yeah, when you pick up a weapon, you have to realize something might happen. And she's saying that she used it to try to scare him, but I don't know. I don't know. And because could it be something else? Because the prosecution presents a very different story. So she's gonna get very upset and they're gonna take a break. She's going to come back. They're going to go back and forth. They're going to go over some they're going to go over the what's my brain? They're going to have the what am I trying to say? They're going to come back to court and there's going to be cross-examination. So I want to play a little bit of that. Once again, if you haven't seen the full hearing down in the description, please watch the full thing. Gonna fast forward. Get her back up on the stand. Let me see. Oh, they're gonna go back and forth about something. Okay. I thought these text messages were interesting because they played these text messages from the defense brought up a few of these text messages, but they didn't do it in context. And in context, these text messages look
There's
different.
difference between you and Doug, correct?
Yes.
And you got married after 13 days.
Yes.
And you spoke with him about or organized with him about starting this ballet.
Yes.
And all of the money for the ballet came from him or investors, right?
My mom also funded part of the ballet.
You didn't put anything into it. Money.
Not from my account, no.
Okay. In fact, during this time in South Carolina, you never worked, did you?
He wouldn't let me work.
Okay. When you said in the very beginning he flew you to South Carolina to visit before you were married, he paid for that, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And the cruise you talked about going on, he paid for that?
No.
He didn't?
He did not pay for the cruise. No.
Okay.
Yeah, he paid for my friend to go, but I had already paid for my mom and I to go. So.
Okay. So he paid for your friend to go?
Yes.
And he did not go with you?
Oh, no. Mm-mm.
I want to ask you about the text messages that the defense talked to you about. It's going to be Defense Exhibit 3. I'm going to hand it to you. But I have the entirety of it on a spreadsheet that I'm going to put up, which is State's Exhibit 99. If we could dim the lights, please. And Judge, based on the rule of completeness, state would enter into evidence State's 99.
Did you want to be heard in addition to what we said earlier?
I haven't actually seen the specific message.
I'm going to fast forward past this part because they're going to figure out, make sure he has that exhibit.
This up on the board behind you, screen.
Fast forward.
Mm-mm.
They're working out
On
technology.
the top line, it gives whether the messages are outgoing or incoming. That would be the third, fourth column that we're looking at. And what I would like you to do is read the body of these as we go through. I'm going to expand it so you can see it. And if you could just read these for the jury.
Okay. One part is just looking at Renee.
Who is that from you or from Doug?
It's from Doug to me.
So from Doug, one part is just looking at Renee. Okay, go ahead.
I'll tell that part to start. The day I met her, I felt her before I saw her. Oh. My ex-husband lived to argue. Renee and I maybe argued 5 times in 15 years, and even then ended up laughing.
I believe Renee is his ex-wife who passed away.
Smiley face. I'm a clown at heart and love people being happy. That seems like a hard act to follow.
So Ashley's saying that seems like a hard act to follow.
Baby. Like always being armed. Yes, my love.
And the outgoing messages are you or Doug?
It looks like outgoing is Doug?
I don't know.
Yeah, outgoing.
My bad. I said that backwards. So outgoing is Doug. So then I guess he said, no, I said it right.
It would be from Doug.
Judge, can we see the date for reference of the message?
The date's there.
That's my love, I think was the last thing you said. And then what's the next thing?
Um, are you doing things that are dangerous?
And you're going to have to speak up just a little bit.
I'm sorry.
Yep. She's incoming. He's outgoing.
Here.
Are you doing things that are dangerous? To think of all the time that you were not with me and understanding them and how to conduct warfare in them for the kingdom.
Where was he when he was sending you these messages? While you were on the cruise?
I believe he would have been in Charleston.
Okay. He wasn't on a business trip.
I don't believe so.
Okay. Continue reading. All the other people.
All the other people. And then a rectangle.
Probably like an emoji or something.
It makes me so sad. And then another rectangle. If I dwelled on it, I would go into rage to remove them from the earth.
And your response to that?
Yes, baby, I hate it. It hurts. He said I could defend myself. You were easy prey for predators. You're sweet and want to please people, and they used that.
And you said, I'm sorry, and then he said,
I desire to exterminate them and hold a challenge. They are rats that should be removed.
And you said,
oh, baby, my love. Yes. Like that night, like last night.
Trigger warning for essay. Okay. So nothing happened, but like they're going to talk about a hypothetical situation. So nothing happened, but he was on the phone with her and he could hear some people in the background. And yeah, so trigger warning. Nothing happened to her, but like what he's going to say is going to be
just the jerks arguing near you about put me in a sheer murderous mood, but I was stuck and I couldn't defend you. I said, thank you, baby, but I was okay. He said, but could have been a fight, etc. Only you being with me will over time remove images in my head. It is same, and knowing you were taken advantage of in my mind makes me explode with anger to take them out. God made you for me.
That was the God made you from me part. So the defense only read those like murderous thoughts text messages without the context that he wanted to defend her and that she was away on a cruise and like it was weird. But in context, he was saying those things in support of her in a way, but like it was having context for it because when you just heard it, you're thinking, "Oh my gosh, how could somebody say this?" But then when you have the back and forth, you kind of see what was happening. It was almost like he saw her as a people pleaser, as somebody that needed to be protected, as someone who needed to be protected. And yeah.
And I said, yes, baby. He said to enjoy the beauty he did craft on earth. I see Renee as Eva's mom, not my wife. It is strange, but
can we pull that back up?
So Doug said, I see Renee as Eva, his daughter's mom, not my wife.
He said it is strange, but there is no emotional connection. I said, well, I'm glad. I just wish I could see it that way.
And you said, I'm glad. I wish I could see it that way. Were you talking about being jealous of his relationship with Renee?
I guess you could put it that way.
Okay. You can continue to read.
I know we both have a battle to fight in our minds. He was sitting on the mantle in the background. I'm crazy, I know. But it just killed my heart. I know I see you in my mind with a bad person with your legs spread and a shitty person.
And that's just like, why do we have to have that part of the conversation? That's just weird.
You. I'm sorry. Rectangle. Now all I see is some douchebag on top of you fucking.
Why do we have to say all these things? And so like but like they're going back and forth. And
Said
it's
you
just
haven't seen the
weird.
warrior side and you never want to. I said no one will ever touch me. I am yours. I don't. You are right. I want to see you only as my sweet and loving husband who is gentle to me and kind. He said we went from joy and passion to now I'm in a testosterone rage inside. And who is always there and safe? That's what I said. And I said, let's not ruin the day. He said, but kill the bad people. Okay. And I said, tell me that you love me.
So this conversation was about things that you had told him that people had done to you, correct? When he's talking about, I'm imagining this, I'm imagining people choke you, he's talking about a conversation that you had had with him explaining that this had happened.
I think he was referring to on the cruise one night. I was talking to him on the phone and I was sitting out in the hallway up at the top deck. And I was just trying to get somewhere where it'd be quiet so I could talk to him. And it was near, there was some like a bar or something up there, I think. I'm not sure. But people were coming in and out, like maybe a restaurant. And while we were talking, he heard.
Is the answer yes or no? Did
She's saying,
She needs to allow her to finish her answer, Your Honor.
let me finish your answer.
He had heard a couple guys that were talking loudly and he got upset because he thought these guys were going to hurt me. And so he had talked about then that he imagined that, you know, I was out in the world without him and that people were going to take advantage of me and that it was going to happen to me.
and he was afraid for your safety.
Yeah.
And he was saying that if anybody hurts you or he thinks about anybody hurting you, it sends him into a rage.
Yes.
And that scared you.
I'm sorry.
And that scared you.
Well,
I wish the prosecutor wasn't like, I get why the prosecutor is asking question. It's just it's coming off in a harsh way to me. And I don't know that that's going to play well with the jury because the harder the prosecutor goes, kind of the more in my mind for me it can. And so I wish the prosecutor had took a different approach with her. Excuse me, because I'm sure the prosecutor is frustrated and is trying to get justice for Doug and his family, but interacting with her in this way, it can backfire with the jury, in my opinion, my just personal opinion.
as I said earlier, at the time, I kind of, played it off in my head that he was just my new husband who was trying to be protective and like.
I could be wrong. I think her ex-husband might have testified one day. This has been a short trial. There have only been 4 days of the trial. Court TV, Law and Crime have both covered it, and Grizzy True Crime has given commentary for every single day and has additional information. There's also, for people that support Ashley, like there is like a supportive, like there's a website that supports Ashley, and then there are all these things. And so yes, we're going to keep going.
Show that he loved me by kind of being, manly.
Okay.
And in some circles, that type of like, so to me, that gives me ick. Like, I don't want my husband to talk about like, if somebody hurt, like, I don't know, like that. I wouldn't want my husband to say those kinds of things. Like that's now, of course, he would say if somebody hurts me, like if somebody were to hurt me, that would upset my husband. It would make him very, very upset. But we wouldn't go back and text with some like, the words were just very strong for me personally. It was, but and there's some spheres where I guess that might be acceptable. I'm not in those spheres, so I don't know.
So
Oh, and that was the other thing.
I want to talk about you having a baby.
She makes allegations that he was aggressive towards the dog and the cat. And I think the DV expert, that I'm going to get to a little bit of his testimony later, Dr. Bruce Ferris, I am going to play a little bit of his. He's going to talk about that's a big warning sign for DV, people that do DV harm.
So Doug had a vasectomy removal in April of 2017, right?
Yes.
And you paid for that.
Part of it went on my debit card or my credit card.
And your intention was to get pregnant.
Yes, we had talked about that. Yeah.
Okay. And this was how many months after you were married?
We got married in September, so October, November, December, January, February, March, April. 7.
And was this during this time? You said he had started criticizing you, right?
Mm-hmm.
About the way you looked, your clothes, the way you acted. He was, according to you, he tried to flip a table, threw a chair, right?
Yes.
He would scream at you.
Yes.
He would call you slut and whore.
Yes.
And you want a baby.
I mean, yeah, we were married. We wanted a family.
Okay. So the vasectomy reversal happens, and I believe you said that this baby was a surprise. Is that what you said?
So this part,
Well, we weren't like planning on it right then. Yeah.
okay. So, because the prosecutor's going to be like, but weren't you having unprotected sex? And so there are certain parts that the prosecutor went in on that I don't know. I don't know if it was helpful, but okay.
Were you having unprotected sex?
I suppose so.
Her approach, now this is the defendant that's on the stand, but I think you just have to be careful with how this comes off to the jury.
Okay. So you knew that unprotected sex would result potentially in a pregnancy.
The doctor had told us that it probably wouldn't work for a while, so it wasn't something that we thought would happen that fast.
Okay. But it did.
Yes.
How quickly? When did you get pregnant?
I guess July.
And right around this time is when you say the incident happened where Doug threw a gun at a wall.
He threw it at me.
Shot a gun at the ceiling. I think you made several allegations, correct?
He admitted to it, but yes.
What were you arguing about?
I think Eva was part of it. I don't specifically remember.
And wasn't it true that you had a problem with Eva and you thought she was disrespecting you?
So this part is going to get for anyone. So I am a part of a blended family. I'm the oldest of my father's children. I have 2 brothers and a sister that are absolutely amazing. We don't have the same mother. My stepmom, like she's been in my life for as long as I can remember. But the way some of this is going to come out, if you have any blended family struggles, some of this might be a little triggering. Just a warning.
At that time.
I wouldn't say I had a problem with Eva. There was a lot of tension in the house, but yeah, there's a lot of things going on that were not ideal.
You knew she was 15.
Yeah.
And you knew she had just lost her mother tragically to death.
Yeah.
And you were how much older than her?
10 years.
10 years, 9 years, 10 years.
And this tension surprised you?
No. I mean, at first he had told me that she was really going to love me and that she was ready to have a woman in her.
And he might have just been saying what she wanted to hear. I don't know if that was accurate. So I know people that have remarried very quickly. And my thought is always, I wonder how the children are doing. And it's none of my business because they're not like, it's not my client. It's not none of that. For the clients that I work with that are looking to introduce a new partner to the family, to the kids, my goal is always to put the needs of the children first. Because sometimes partners can go into it only thinking of their needs and not really thinking of how this can impact the kids.
Her life, and that he wanted me to move in quickly because she needed a mom. So he made it sound like she also felt that way.
And you had no feelings of your own?
I was excited to get to be her stepmom.
And you gave her a shadow box right around this time, correct?
For Christmas, so it would have been in December.
All right. And what was the shadow box?
You want me to describe it?
Yes.
It was like a small picture that had like deep sides and like the glass was at the front of it. And there was a sand dollar that I had painted and decorated. And I put it on like a black cardstock. and I wrote a saying on it that said something about how.
So Eva just walked out. So that's what court TV just showed. This part was probably going to get triggering for Eva. I've worked with families of victims that some families have been unable to go to court. Just it would be too triggering for them. For some families that did go to court, we would sometimes schedule sessions either the day before or the day after just to kind of process through. We talk about, if it ever gets to the point where they do need to leave, just we always just kind of talk about how to best support their mental health as they're sitting through these things. But yeah, so Ashley's describing the shadow box that she made for Eve.
Like you can be strong through the storms, and that seashells are beautiful things that come out of storms.
And that shadow box is the reason you were arguing that day with Doug, correct?
I know it came up at one point. I don't know if that was the reason.
And what was the problem with the shadow box?
Eva had taken it apart, and I guess had thrown out the thing that I made and was using the picture frame for something else.
What was she using the picture frame for?
She had put a rose from her mom's funeral in it.
And that upset you pretty badly, didn't it?
Made me really sad.
So let's slow that down a little bit, okay? So she made this shadow box for Eva and gave it to her for Christmas. And I wonder if this was like their first Christmas together. And okay, and Eva decided to take apart the box and she put in a rose from her mom. She decided to she's 15 years old. It's normal for 15-year-olds to show that they're struggling, that they're upset through their behaviors. That is 100% normal. What Eva did, I wouldn't have even disciplined her. Like that would be a normal teenage reaction. Okay. Eva could have thrown it in the trash for all I cared. Like when you give a gift, you have no control over how the person that receives it accepts it. Like, okay, that was something that was really important to her. Eva could have looked at it as kind of gaslighting her, or like she could have looked at it, not gaslighting. I want to say, what's the word? There's when you're struggling and people are like, it'll be fine, it'll be fine. It's in the church, religious, where like toxic positivity. So sometimes if somebody's struggling, sometimes the best thing you can do is be like, this is hard for you, and that's okay. I see you're in pain, and I'm not trying to make it better. Minimizing is another word for it, or that toxic positivity where like there are rainbows after the sunshine. She's in a better place. Like when people are grieving, sometimes they don't want to hear that. And she's not only grieving the loss of her mom, she's also having to accept her dad has a new wife. The new wife is like, only could be like is old enough. Her dad could have had her when he was like 20. Does that like the wife is old enough to be his daughter? And like that could be weird. That could be really, really weird. And my personal feeling is that Ashley didn't handle that situation with an emotional maturity, but she was 24, 25 years old. So, I mean, I don't know what he expected.
I'd taken a lot of time to make it for her, and I thought it was special. And
you began crying.
Yes.
And you dropped to the floor and sobbed hysterically.
Probably.
You were so upset that she put her dead mother's rose in the shadow box.
It wasn't that. It was that she took it apart. I mean, I would have bought her another shadow box.
You went to Doug and said it was disrespectful that she took this apart.
According to Doug?
No, according to you. You went to Doug and said, she's acting disrespectfully. You need to handle her. She upset me. I'm crying.
I don't remember saying that about that.
Isn't it, in fact, what you were arguing about before this whole incident with the gun and the ceiling?
Is this relevant as it relates to the daughter? Can you approach, please?
Gather and approach. Sidebar.
At one point, we're in the car with Doug, right?
I'm gonna rewind it. Make sure we have the beginning. There we go.
So the day that this argument happened, you actually, at one point, were in the car with Doug, right?
Yes.
Okay, you were going to the bank and going to do some other errands?
I believe so.
And the entire time, you're upset about this shadow box?
I don't distinctly. The argument kind of came from there, I guess.
And in fact, it wasn't an argument, right? It was you being upset.
He said that like life was out of control and he couldn't deal with the people at home and he couldn't deal with the people at the ballet. And he felt like everything was just too stressful and he was upset with everybody.
And didn't he ask you to stop?
I'm sure at some point.
And you did.
And she kind of abandoned the ballet because he started it for her. And then, but like she got pregnant and she moved in with her mom. And then the ballet fell apart completely.
Didn't stop
I guess not.
for the car ride. No. Yes or no?
I don't remember.
And you kept telling him you need to discipline Eva.
I don't remember saying that.
And he said, let's just stop talking about this for a while. I need to think.
He was yelling at me.
So he's yelling at you, but you weren't sitting there like you are now, were you? You weren't sitting there like this.
I guess I was buckled into the car, so I probably would have been sitting further back.
And you didn't stop. And you get home, you're still arguing, correct?
He was still yelling at me, yes.
And you're not yelling at all. And the fact that he had a gun.
So this is the part that I'm not sure if she's being, I don't know if she's downplaying because it sounds like they were going back and forth about this. And it sounds like the family, so Doug's, I think brother, I could be wrong, or like sounds like Doug's family is aware that there's more to the situation than what she's saying in this moment. That's their allegation. I don't know what's true.
Gun with him when you continue to argue in the house was because he grabbed the gun from inside the car to bring his items from the car into the house, correct?
I'm not sure why he had it, I guess.
Okay. And it was in a holster.
I believe so.
And you both used to carry guns.
Mm-hmm.
You carried guns on a regular basis.
Yes,
you
ma'am.
have had at the time more than one gun.
Yes, ma'am.
And you actually bragged, as well as Doug, about having guns, correct?
Yes.
And you would go shoot them on a regular basis.
I haven't been to the range since before the presidential election.
Okay. But during the time that you met Doug at a political event, you had one of the guns in your bra.
Yes, that's where I concealed carried.
Okay.
Oh, nice. So the only thing I want to say is I think the demeanor that the prosecution is having with her, I don't think that, I don't know if that's playing well with the jury. I wish somebody from the courtroom could say, because so I'm a very sarcastic person. I like snark. I like all of that. But with somebody like this on the stand, you can have snark with Aliyah Boulaban. You can have snark with like a defendant that is being combative. To me, having this approach with this type of defendant, it can make them look more of a victim to the jury. That's just my thought.
So having a firearm in a car or in the house is not that unusual to you.
No, ma'am.
All right. So after you decide, there's this argument that continues on and on and on and on. And you're still asking Doug to discipline Eva.
I don't recall that.
And you say he was waving a gun around and threw a gun at.
And that's where I'm not sure if the prosecution is going, if the jury is going to look at the things that she didn't remember and the things that she did remember. I don't know how the jury is going to see this. All right. So I want to skip ahead. There was a portion of her testimony where the prosecutor asked her to act out what happened with Doug, and she becomes very emotional. I think that portion can be very, very triggering, and she really falls apart. If you want to go back and see that part, please go back and watch that section, because I don't know. Now, I think the prosecution was going to try to say that Doug wasn't a threat to her, but I'm not sure how the jury is going to take how she had to reenact the crime. I don't know how the jury is going to take that part. To me, when I saw it, it looked like she was, because she didn't immediately switch in and out of emotions. To me, it did seem like it took her longer. It looked like it took about 30. It seemed like it took a minute for her to compose herself, but that's just from where I was. I don't know. So this is Dr. Bruce Ferris. He has a ton of experience. He's going to give a whole lot of anecdotes. He is going to just have a lot of thoughts. He's going to talk about a lot of different cases that he's worked on. He is, and that the prosecution is going to have an issue with that because they don't want him bringing up a ton of all of these other hypothetical cases that aren't related to this case. And the prosecution is also going to have an issue with they want to make sure that he's not going to try to give an opinion based on this case. And so let's listen to a little bit of this and we'll keep going.
That and for anyone that doesn't know, batter's intervention is program is for offenders. It's usually court ordered, part of probation or part of a sentence or part of an injunction or a restraining order. It's a 6-month psychoeducational class. I've been trained for that and teach that. I also I used to teach governor ad litem volunteers about domestic violence and effects on children. I've taught the 8th Circuit staff at the state attorney's office about domestic violence and impact to women and children, and batter's intervention, how to interview people. From 2008 to 2020, I taught at the University of Florida Law Clinic on intimate partner violence to law students about the same type of subject, domestic violence.
So he's very verbose. So people say that he reminded them of Dr. Lewis. Dr. Lewis was unhinged to me. He didn't come off unhinged. It did remind me of the Jodi Arias psychologist, the one that it was like, why are you spending so much time with her? But like, because I think the prosecution was upset that he talked with her for so long, and this wasn't an evaluation because he met with her for somewhere between like 14 to 20 hours or something. So the prosecution was a little upset about that. But
and intimate partner violence and effects, and also enforcement of the law. I also trained police officers.
I think he was a former police officer as well. I could be wrong.
About domestic violence enforcement. Currently, since 2009, I've been teaching officers how to de-escalate confrontations as part of the crisis intervention training team. I teach the de-escalation part of that. There's a lot more I could talk about, but that's the nature, and you can see in my CV.
All right, let's talk about your work experience.
Okay, so I have an affiliation with Village Counseling Center, doing therapy, DCF cases, and domestic violence related cases. I used to also work with Creative Counseling in Gainesville, doing teaching batter's intervention program classes and doing individual therapy.
Okay, so I need to slow him down. I can hear him at this speed, but I'll just let him talk normally.
I also have my own practice now, and I do individual counseling. Recently, I just looked up, since 2014, I've treated almost 1,000 individual clients or patients as an individual therapist. Work experience we're still talking about.
So the reason why I'm laughing is because you want to try to have your vita be a little concise. And I've learned that from watching lawyers talk about when an expert gives a very concise vita, because it's easy to understand. Let me also mention, this is a Daubert hearing. The jury is not present. So let me just say that again. Right now, the jury is not present for this portion. Okay. Because they are determining.
Yes, okay, of course,
my bad. They are determining if his testimony can come in, and the judge has not ruled yet on will his testimony be admissible or not. Like, will he be able to testify as maybe an expert in domestic violence? I guess, like, because it was kind of weird because I think he said that he was not giving an opinion that she was a victim of that she did have battered woman syndrome, but he was saying that she was a victim of intimate partner violence. It was a lot for me personally.
Mentioned the doing consulting for attorneys on domestic violence and being an expert witness. Are we you're gonna want to know my current work or my past work?
Well, let's stay in the past. How about any experience with?
Okay, so trust me, he has a ton of experience, okay? He has a ton of experience. We're gonna jump ahead.
Yeah, let's see if, Judge, with court's permission, we put the screen.
I believe they're putting up what's the word? The coercive control chart that I showed earlier.
Judge, may I ask you a question?
I missed this part.
Could I stand over here?
No.
Sure.
And rather than try to do it for you?
Reposition as you need. It's just us.
Thank you.
I missed that part when I watched it the first time.
It's a little easier to see this way for me.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Judge.
Oh, you know what though?
Yeah, Mike.
The only thing is you can't be so far that the court reporter can't hear you, and she's listening to these microphones.
Okay.
So why don't you turn that,
Okay.
and then if you just position so you're facing there.
Okay. Can you hear me okay?
Okay, there
Can
we
you
go.
hear me now? Yes. How does this work?
I missed this part when I watched it yesterday.
Okay. Okay. So you can see that.
Yeah, I was going to say,
Yeah.
sure.
Judge, thanks for reminding me. So this is the Duluth, as I said, if you look here, Domestic Abuse Intervention Project. And this was I don't know, maybe 30 some years ago, 30, 40 years ago. And this is the standard used around the country.
Okay, so I showed this chart. I will show it one more time just because I can do it a little quicker than he's probably going to do it. So, and I like comparing it with the nonviolence versus harmful. And within power and control, if the relationship is based in power and control, that's using coercion and threats, intimidation, emotional harm, isolation, minimizing, denying and blaming, using the children, using privilege, and using economic harm. And then within a nonviolent relationship, there is negotiation and fairness, non threatening behavior, respect, trust and support, honesty and accountability, responsible parenting, shared responsibility, and economic partnership. Okay. So that is what he's going to go over. Let's get past that. So he sat back down. I want to hear a little bit about this part. And I wonder if the prosecution would ask if any of her behaviors fit within any of that as well, because that's where it seemed like the relationship was toxic. And if when I'm working with clients that are in a toxic dynamic, and if my client is engaging in using the children in, you know, manipulation and those types of behaviors, I'm going to call that out and have them get those needs met in healthier ways. Set boundaries, say no. And if they're not safe enough to do that, because sometimes in a harmful relationship, you're not able to say no, but sometimes you can have sneaky boundaries where it's like instead of saying no, I can say, let me get back to you, let me see, let me check on that. Or I can say, I'm not sure. I think I might already have something else scheduled instead of just saying no. Like sometimes we can find sneaky ways to set a boundary if we need to while we're working on them getting safe. And
Manipulate to get her to do what he wants to do, that they feel a sense of ownership, and they use these techniques to control. They also, the victim wants to appear to be going along. They don't want to anger him. They'll actively hide this from family and society because if it gets out, he's going to be mad. And I could speak certainly a lot more about that.
Are there, Mr. Ferris, common characteristics that abusers share?
Yes, they could be anyone from any socioeconomic. I've been involved as a therapist and as a detective enforcing the law with all types of society and sexual orientation, from wealthy, well-known NASA scientists, doctors as a perpetrator to the homeless person. and everyone in between. And in Gainesville, where I worked, we have a great population from all around the world there. And I didn't find a difference other than sometimes attitude, but every socioeconomic group, it's very, and also they tend to be males, but females also. Just yesterday, I took on a new client, spoke to him. His wife's in jail. He has 4 children with her, and he's a
And I don't know if he should be giving all of these details about current clients. I don't know. He's going to have a lot of stories, a lot of anecdotes. Any story that I talk about, it can apply to 10 or more. It's typically going to apply to multiple people. The ones that might apply to that might be a little bit more specific, I have permission to share the general, but never the specifics, never any identifying information. But, and then, like, anytime that I'm saying, "Oh, I was talking about this with a client," it's typically multiple clients, or it's a client that showed me about echoism or something, which I had never heard about, and, like, it's a very specific situation, and so it's just you gotta this is streamed publicly. This is available everywhere. And so, he's gonna give a lot of personal examples. He pretty much feels that she was in an unsafe relationship. I'm just gonna keep going. And that she engaged in behavior, because I took notes, that that she was compliant, that but I don't know that she was, because she wasn't following the plan. Um that she was using appeasement, that she would say what he wanted, and then she would kinda do something else outside of that. He felt that she was afraid of him, she was avoiding pain, that she was in fear, and he felt that she was the victim of gaslighting and emotional harm. And that once again, when the person goes to leave, that's often the most dangerous time, and that's where you wanna try to leave when they're not in the house. You wanna have a secret plan, like, you have to do these things when they're not around, because things can escalate if you are in an unsafe situation. And so, Imma see where he's at right now.
in a relationship. I've worked many cases, to my surprise, where there was no reporting of the violence or domestic abuse occurring. And so the woman, the mother, wouldn't seek a divorce because they knew, typically in our state, if there's no extreme reason, criminal history, drug history, violence, etc., it's going to be a 50-50 custody. So I have women who have stayed in the relationship, taking the abuse, because she's so concerned that she wouldn't want her child to be alone with that perpetrator. She sees him as a brute or a bad role model, etc.
And might that type of a scenario play?
I've also had some situations where the person who was the victim of harm in the relationship, but there is no indication that the person is being harmful towards the child, that fear of what if they are, that sometimes that fear can kind of come over, and it can really cloud things. And when the children are old enough, so their daughter was too young for you to be able to trust to ask the child, like, to be able to talk with the child. I've worked with situations where, like, a child was kind of playing both parents against one another, was saying one thing to one parent, another thing to another parent, and I was kind of the person in the middle, and we were kind of helping resolve everything, see everything. There were no allegations of anything, but there was definitely fear of what's going to happen. And that's where, as a parent, if I decide to parallel parenting. And that's what she says that she looked up. I want to look up parallel parenting, because that is something. If you are parenting with a narcissist, it's the difference between co-parenting and parallel parenting. And when you type in things, all right, here we go. AI tries to generate options for you. And so, parallel parenting, if you're in a high conflict situation, parallel says, I'm going to focus on what happens in my house and not even worry about what happens in their house as long as my child is safe. Where if in my house, when these are my rules here, if they have different rules there, as long as my child is safe, their basic needs are met, I'm not going to control what happens over there. And because sometimes with a high conflict situation, a part of the roping the person in is using the child to keep going back and forth. And so parallel parenting is different from co-parenting, because with co-parenting we're working together to raise the children. We might have similar rules, we might attend activities together, there might be a lot of communication. With parallel parenting, each parent has certain responsibilities, and but that the logistics of what happens during your time, I'm not trying to control that. And there can be benefits of parallel parenting. It's often better for the children if it is a high conflict separation or divorce. And I did a video with a friend. So with because I think I have an older video about parenting with co-parenting with somebody that's toxic. And I had a guest and we talked about that. I'll have to try to put that in there. Um, so and so there were some allegations that she made, and how everything happened, I don't know where the truth lies. I do know that there were interviews, there were investigations, nothing was founded. There was no history of any type of harm towards his older daughter. And so I don't know. I don't know where the truth lies with that. Um all right.
Play out with the woman acting happy in an effort to go along and be in the company of the abuser to protect her child.
Without a doubt, that's the whole scenario. And and there are women that are better at it and more sophisticated at it than others. I'm just finished working a case.
Another anecdote. Lots of anecdotes. All right. So let's see. The prosecutor is going to cross-examine him and she's not going to be happy. Like, she's visibly going to be upset.
I'm going just by memory.
This is the amount of time that he spent
I'd be
with her.
guessing a little bit here, so I apologize. Could have been
The amount of time that he spent with her.
I'm just trying to. Could have been 15 to 20 hours easily.
So you spent 15 to 20 hours speaking to Miss Benefield.
I did
Okay. And did you review paperwork in this case?
a lot. That's how I came to my conclusions uniquely from the paperwork.
When you say uniquely from the paperwork, are you telling this court that you spent 15 to 20 hours with Miss Benefield, but you didn't base the opinions that you gave previously in a depot on that time?
That's true. I did not get to do an assessment of her. I was not hired to do an assessment. I did not produce an assessment.
Well, what were you?
So 15 to 20 hours is a lot of time to spend with someone. And normally, as an expert that's giving an opinion, you wouldn't spend it, from what I understand, that's a lot of time. And that's what happened in the Jodi Arias case. I think it was like 15 to 20 hours that he spent evaluating her. And the court was like, I think it might have been more. It was a lot of time. He gave her a book. There were all these things that came out. And the court was like, what just happened? And it just sounds like a lot of time, especially for it to not be an assessment. Then was it treatment? I don't know what this was.
Doing for 15 to 20 hours?
some of it was being a counselor, and some of it was I have a reputation to keep, and I wanted to understand was this really a victim? So kind of got into a routine of understanding some timeline with her about.
But 15 to 20 hours and doing therapy with her. So to that to be the treatment provider, but also the person giving the opinion, I don't think that's standard. I think that's outside of the norm. I could be wrong. I don't think I am, but I could
About
be
what
wrong.
occurred and how did it fit the facts that I was reading about.
Well, wouldn't that say, if what you just said is you needed to determine if she was a real victim, then it must have come into your decision-making about this case, with that assessment you made. Is that correct?
Could you restate the question,
Well,
please?
you just testified that you spent 15 to 20 hours with Ms. Benefield, and part of that was to make an assessment on whether or not she was a real victim.
That's what he said.
And so,
Not to make an assessment as I compared the facts that I knew from what I was reading. I wanted some validity, and then
So if he was just giving a general opinion, from what I understand, you would normally read depositions, you would watch testimony, you would not meet individually with the client to make that type of assessment. Typically, I unless you were doing an evaluation. If you're not doing it, and you definitely wouldn't turn it into therapy, that's my understanding of what would happen. So this was strange, and I definitely wanted to talk about it. Like, what?
some of my time was being empathetic and listening to her.
and
But my conclusions I've come to that I talk about in the deposition were 100% from the discovery. Those were the items, and I could list them for you if you'd like.
did they include the stand your ground motion filed by Mr. Taylor and the defendant?
At the time, that was one of the items. Certainly, if I subtract that from what the things he quotes in the stand your ground
Yes.
were other discovery items. Doug admitting to shooting the gun into the ceiling, him telling that to his priest, and phone calls and texts. So I didn't need the stand your.
I'm not sure you can control him on direct. So I skipped through direct examination. One question would be asked, and then there would be like a 10-minute answer. Okay? Like I skipped through direct. I'm not sure he can be controlled on direct. They would have to set some very clear boundaries. I think if he had the boundaries, the jury isn't present, and so I don't know if he took more leeway because the jury wasn't there. Because I've seen somebody during a Dahlberg hearing not say enough and then say more on the stand, and the judge was like, "Wait a minute, this didn't come out at the other hearing," and that caused a problem. That happened in the Christopher, but y'all know me and names. Christopher, I'm so bad with names. It happened in a recent the treadmill case, where one of the doctors, her testimony kind of changed a little during when the jury was there, and that became Gregor. Thank you, Donnie. Me and names during the Christopher Gregor case. And so I don't know if he just was saying everything to say, "Hey, what are y'all going to use?" But that could be more confusing, I think. And so, Vala, so I talk a lot about a survivor mentality, and the healthiest place, in my personal opinion, is for a person that has been through a lot. So, I have experienced my own things in life, and I view myself as a survivor. Victims don't take responsibility. Victims don't take accountability. But like this is a different, like not in court. Does that make sense? Like in court, you're viewed that way because it's court. And I worked with a lot of clients that chose to not press charges because they weren't mentally in a place to combat the questioning of what were you wearing, what did you do, did you actually say, like they couldn't they just weren't in a place to mentally handle that. um I've had a lot of clients that I did support through pressing charges, and I always think justice is up to my clients, and they get to pick what happens there. And but a survivor, it's a different mentality, and As a survivor, I know that healing is my responsibility. So I can't control what happened to me, but I can control that I'm not reactive, that I'm managing my emotions, and that takes skills. And I practice dialectical behavior therapy skills. I actively practice mindfulness. I do all those things. Sarah asked a great question. How much of this was based on her self-report? I don't know what happened in those 15 to 20 hours. He didn't write a report. And I think they're gonna determine that he's not gonna be able to let any of that come in. I think they are gonna determine the defense is gonna kinda draw back and say they just want him to talk about in these hypothetical situations, would it make sense why a person was smiling in a picture with their alleged, abuser? Like they're gonna say stuff like that.
Ground uh, paperwork document to find all those bits of information that I found through looking at Discovery.
Discovery. Which parts of Discovery?
Well, so the portions of the stand your ground about what happened that night
Mhm.
were not in Discovery. That Mr. Benefield took a bladed stance and did this.
No, I didn't. Those items were not part of my conclusion. I could tell you I have 13 items I use uniquely in Discovery that came to my conclusion on.
So what's gonna come up is there are things that he was provided that the prosecution doesn't have. That's a red flag. There are things that he has that he reviewed and used to base his opinion that did not come into the case, which so that's why the defense is gonna backtrack real
And it
bad.
didn't include, and I never spoke to Ms. Benefield about what you just said about bladed stance. I never talked to her.
So this is gonna be interesting. He never talked to her about the day of the incident. He only talked to her about their relationship up until the day of the incident. That's what he's saying.
About that.
Well, you said you spoke to her to determine if she was I guess to determine her veracity. Is that what you're trying to say?
That's one word, but I never spoke to her about the event of the shooting. Never.
Okay. Did you speak to her about the other things that were in the stand your ground hearing and the discovery from things that had occurred in the past?
I think some of the things did. Yes. As I think about, as she's going, basically I did some timeline understanding, when they met.
I see why y'all are getting Dr. Lewis vibes. I'm so sorry. So I watched him on 1.5 speed. Maybe I think it was 1.5. I don't think it was 1.25. My ADHD likes it when things go fast. Him going this slow, I understand why, because people were in Grizzy True Crimes chat, just like, oh my gosh, like the chat was hilarious. I was catching up because I was in between clients trying to get notes done and listen to this, but
Up until before the event, and some of those items were in there.
And did you develop an opinion as to whether or not Miss Benefield was a battered spouse?
okay. So she asked a great question. Did you form an opinion as to whether or not she was a battered spouse? So, Lady J, if you like court, if you did not watch the Letitia Stout trial on my channel, it is one of my most viewed videos, Letitia Stout. And it's really me just wanting to pull out my hair because the testimony was what? Like the testimony, she's a dissociative identity expert. She's likely retired. I don't know what happened after court, but Dr. Lewis who is a you found me during that trial. Yes. So I think that trial, I think that trial got my kiddo Nintendo Switch. Like, so I did 2 videos on Dr. Lewis, one reacting to her testimony, and then it got to a point where I couldn't. I was too triggered. It was too much because it is I try to be neutral and calm, but like it was bad. It was bad. It was really, really bad. She was a defense expert. She tries to say the defense lied to her. Like it was, but then they have emails and people were questioning her like memory, but it didn't seem like it was a memory issue to me. It sounded more like she sees dissociative identity disorder where no one else can find it. Possibly because it might not be there, but it's a whole thing. So, Letitia Stout, it's a horrific case. It's a sad case. A young boy was unalived because she was just an evil stepmom. It was just bad. It's a very, very horrific case. So, but that testimony was absolutely bonkers.
Like as far as battered spouse syndrome, if you would say that she suffered from battered spouse syndrome.
Yeah, I did not determine that. I determined that she was a victim of domestic violence and that Doug was the perpetrator of that.
Based on
All the discovery and how it fits in with the continuum of power and control and her compliance, her fear, etc.
I don't have anything else, Judge. Thanks.
The judge is going to have some questions.
Tell us what you reviewed.
I reviewed a deposition that Doug gave, and I had a written version. He makes admissions. He talks about the gunshot. He talks about punching the dog, throwing the gun, punching holes in the wall. There was a letter to his pastor where Doug admits punching a hole in the wall and shooting the gun in the ceiling. There was a domestic violence injunction in South Carolina prohibiting mutual contact, and the text of that.
That they
The
stipulated
really important piece of evidence for me was Ashley wrote a letter on September 18th, 2017, when she separated, outlining domestic violence that Doug did to her. I have a copy of that if you want me to go through the items, but she outlines, without necessarily being a domestic violence counselor at all, she talks, it all fits very discreetly into what power and control.
And some people will say, does it fit too neatly? And I don't know that. So the hard part about situations like this is she would have to have a forensic evaluation that was looking for malingering. And that's what Amber Heard had with Dr. Curry. We need Dr. Curry. Can Dr. Curry? It's not going to happen. That's on our wish list, because you need somebody to go in to see, is this fitting too well for a particular reason to like not go to jail? I don't know. Like, is it fitting too well? And I don't know. I honestly, this is a difficult one where and because I'm not gonna watch every single second. Y'all know I have like a kid. I have a whole private practice. I have notes and reports to write. So I can't watch everything. But from what I've seen, if I was on the jury, I don't know. I don't know. I would and they haven't closed out yet. Hedgehog in space, me too. I'm very torn. I'm torn. And she's charged with second degree. So second degree, I think, let me see, second degree in Florida. So the statute for second degree in Florida, unlawful of a person by an act that is dangerous and shows a depraved mind. So that's what the prosecution has to prove, that it was an unlawful unaliving of a person by an act that is dangerous to others and shows a depraved mind. Different from first degree because it doesn't require premeditation. And so the act was so dangerous that a reasonable person would not do what this person did. If I was in that situation, I wouldn't have done what she did. And Because but like, but that's where it's a sticky situation. So I'm not sure. So let's let him talk a little bit more.
Control and what abused women experience at the hands of their
Wasn't he just reading a list of what he went over? Wasn't that what was happening? Was he reading a list of what he went over to the judge? I thought that's what was happening.
abusers. It was, and also for me, if I might say, that was a frozen moment in time. That wasn't something that she said after I met her or something like that. This was from,
Oh yeah.
2017.
So this was just the list of the things he reviewed.
And were you struck
Oh.
by the terms
Sorry, the defense is asking him more questions. Yes.
of basically art that she unwittingly included in that letter as it relates to?
I'm going to fast forward past this part, and I'm going to get to the part where the judge is going to have some questions. All right, let's play this.
Cider of the law. So there are a couple of questions I have. I've said this multiple times. Mr. Taylor, I probably said it in hearings with you. I know you two have heard it. If you object to one of my questions, object. Please put your objection on the record.
I love this judge. This judge is so cute. I just want to like this judge. I love this judge. Okay. I've never seen this judge before, I don't think. I like this judge. And this judge is like, hey, if you're gonna object, object. Okay. And so yeah.
I have actually sustained objections against my own questions before. So I try to be intellectually honest, and if it's in retrospect, I realize that's not a good question.
You have been good about that, Judge.
First, I did not receive a copy of your CV in evidence. It may be in the file.
So they are going to find his curriculum vitae, and that takes time. And he's going to look at it to make sure that it actually is his CV and there's highlighting on it. So the judge is going to make sure that that's okay. And that's what's going to happen.
They have arrested their witness. And I understand what I have a guess as to what your questions will likely be, but that is my only concern. I don't know what objection that would be, but.
I mean, don't forget there's also the general and proper. So you object away.
Yeah,
You know me, I don't mind.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
You're looking at his curriculum vitae. That's like a resume. It's a professional resume.
13 things that you had reviewed.
Yes, sir.
And I was writing them down as we went, and I'm taking notes. I only got 12.
Okay. So do you want me to briefly?
I do. I don't want the narrative portion.
No,
I just want you to tell me.
Or you tell me. Okay, I'll tell you.
No, it's got to be the other one.
I don't want the narrative version. The judge is like, I don't want all the extra. Like, I just want what happened. Don't give me the narrative version. I like this judge.
You have to say to me.
I'll give you the first 3 or 4 words of each. Number 1, deposition of Doug. Number 2, letter to pasture. Number 3.
A little slower.
Okay, sorry. Number 3, DV injunction from South Carolina. Number 4, 9/18/17 letter from Ashley. Number 5, deposition of neighbor. Number 6, text of Doug admitting. 7, text from ex-wife. 8, the DV injunction. That's Manatee County. Number 9 was Dr. Russell. 10 was the telephone calls between Doug and Ashley. Number 11 was the WhatsApp phone messages between Ashley and Doug. Number 12 was the Broder testimony.
And I wonder if he got the full messages or just the ones the defense wanted him to see.
And number 13 was the text, kick dog through cat and between Ashley and Doug.
Can I just ask to clarify, you said phone calls between Ashley and Doug. What did you say?
Yes, from 8/16/2019 I have a transcript of phone calls between them.
And the prosecution does not have that.
Transcript of phone calls?
The prosecution
believe so.
doesn't have this.
No.
So I'm not a lawyer, Alberto. I am not a lawyer. I think it does the defense a disservice if they don't show everything, because that's what happened in Chad Daybell's case. His expert didn't have everything. And I think it was one of the pathologists or something. They were like, well, did you see this? Did you see this? Because our expert reviewed these 20 things, you only reviewed 5. And so our expert is more credible because they reviewed everything and you didn't review everything. So I think it makes a witness more credible when the defense does give them everything, because often the defense can know what their opinion is before they call them. So if an expert doesn't have an opinion that goes along with what the defense wants, they just won't call that person. If the prosecution finds out, they might call that person, but like that's what can happen. And so yeah.
All right, that's all the questions I had, surprisingly. State, do you have any questions based on my questions?
No, sir. Thank you.
Mr. Taylor, do you have any questions based on my questions?
Okay, so they're going to go back and forth. We still do not know if his testimony is going to come in or not. We do not know. Per lawyer, defense doesn't have to produce everything, but they do have to produce things they intend to use in court. Cool. That's good to know. Thank you for that. If it's Kaylee, I'm sorry if I said that wrong. That's how yes, let me know. All right. I personally think it's more helpful when the defense provides, I'm talking about if the defense provides the expert all of the evidence they would need to form an opinion. Because what'll happen is the prosecution will be like, well, did you see this? Did you see this? And it makes their expert look worse if they don't know everything. I thought the prosecution did bring up some of her Google searches. I could be wrong. Or did the defense bring it up? I don't even know. I'm not sure. I appreciate you all for being here. This one has been over 2 hours, and there are over 500 of you all here. I'm a licensed psychologist in Virginia. I like sharing just my commentary and like breaking down some of these topics. And in this, I hope what we do get is if you are in an unsafe relationship, an unsafe situation, and you decide to leave, always reach out for supports. There are people that have talked about getting a new phone. When you have children, it makes it more difficult because you do still have to, that person still has to have access to their child, because it can be parent alienation if you cut them off from the child. And it can be frustrating if DSS doesn't see what you see, but that's where you try to partner with people. You get the child into play therapy, because if the play therapist has concerns, but you just want to be careful that you're not seeing the ex's behavior that's been harmful to you through like a lens. Yeah, because it can just cause additional issues, additional problems. And so I truly appreciate you all. Just a heads up, so on Tuesday, I believe at 5:45 p.m., I am going to cover the Sonia Massey case. It is a very, very troubling case. I am not going to play the video. Sonia Massey was a unarmed Black woman, 36 years old, that called the police, and the situation is just very troubling, very problematic, and it didn't have to end the way that it ended. And so I'm going to be dedicating some time to cover that case on Tuesday. Okay. Yes. Yes. So Sonia, it's Massey. Do not, so the video is triggering. Okay, the video is extremely triggering. Watching the video can cause secondary trauma. I have watched the beginning portion. I do not watch the portion of where she was unalived, and I watch the portion after. I just, for my own mental health, just to not trigger my own racial trauma, I just can't watch that part. And so, Sonia Massey, extremely sad case. I do think she had mental health struggles, but the way it was handled was not appropriate by the officer. And he's been charged with first degree murder. And so we are going to talk about that on Tuesday. I so appreciate you all. I hope you all enjoy the rest of your weekend. And I will see y'all on Tuesday. Bye.